Yesterday for the Jesse tree, we heard the story of Adam and Eve. Eyes are on me now. We heard the story of Adam and Eve. We heard about creation and then Adam and Eve, right? The next story in the Bible that comes after Adam and Eve, and this can be a little confusing, but don't stress. So Adam and Eve are sent out of the garden, right? Do you remember that? Okay, we need to be still. Everybody's still. Bibles are still, iPads are still, we're still. Okay. So, the next story, Bibles are down and closed. Our hands are flat, our iPads are flipped. Thank you. Giada, thank you, ma'am. So, this next part is important. It's not going on your Jesse tree, but it is important. So, Adam and Eve have two sons, Cain and Abel. Some of you may remember these names. So, Cain was born first, and Abel was born second. Abel became a shepherd, but Cain was a farmer. After some time, Cain brought his harvest and gave it as an offering to the Lord. Then Abel brought the first lamb to be born of his sheep, listening to me. You're not going to find it in there, just listen. Killed it and gave the best parts as an offering. The Lord was pleased with Abel and his offering, but he rejected Cain's offering. Because Abel gave the best that he had. And Cain was like, hey, I got some food in the back of my pantry I can donate. Right? Have we all done that before? Like, yikes, there's a food drive and you just grab stuff. And that's wonderful to help the poor, don't get me wrong. But when you're giving it as an offering to God, like, you're supposed to make offerings and really give of yourself, that's not what he did. So the Lord liked Abel, but rejected Cain's offering. Cain became furious and scowled in anger. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you so angry? Why is that scowl on your face? If you had done the right thing, you would be smiling. But because you have done evil, sin is crouching at your door. It wants to rule you, but you must overcome it. Then Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out in the fields. When they were out in the fields, Cain turned on his brother and killed him. The Lord asked Cain, where's your brother Abel? He answered, I don't know. Am I supposed to take care of my brother? Then the Lord said, why have you done such a terrible thing? Your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground like a voice calling for revenge. You are placed under a curse and can no longer farm in the soil. If you try to grow crops, the soil will not produce anything. You will be a homeless wanderer of the earth. And Cain said to the Lord, this punishment is too hard for me to bear. You're driving me off the land and away from your presence. I will be a homeless wanderer on the earth, and anyone who finds me will kill me. But the Lord answered, no, if anyone kills you, 7 lives will be taken in revenge. So the Lord put a mark on Cain to warn anyone who met him not to kill him. And Cain went away from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of wandering, which is east of Eden. So, we have, again, this isn't going on our Jesse tree, but I think it's an important part of our biblical history in our past, is that once again, even the children of Adam and Eve messed up. We have a close relationship with God with Abel, and then Cain, who killed his brother. Now, as you read on, we're going to start to talk about human wickedness in a minute. And people started to mess up. So one thing that kids ask me every year somebody's asked me this, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask it and answer it, okay? Because y'all are smart. And every year people say, well, if Adam and Eve had 2 sons, how are there other people on the earth? So, right? Because if you keep reading, you're going to find out that they went to cities and they traveled, and you're like, well, how is there a city if Adam and Eve are, what? So Adam and Eve is there to show us that God created humans. Fair enough? We know that God created people. Just like God, the 7 days. 7 days God's time, right? So don't stress the Adam and Eve and then how are their people and cities, what happened, no. The other time people start to question, and this has not happened since I started teaching the Jesse tree, so don't mess up next year. Is it used to be kids would go down to Mrs. Benson and say, well, how are their cities? Okay, it's an explanation. This is not all of human history in one book. Can we agree on that? That doesn't make it not real. If I said, hey, I want you to write down everything you've done today, would you all write down the same things? Even if you said at school, would you all write down the same things? No. Would anyone be, let's say you're all being 100% truthful too. Nobody's being silly or lying. Would anybody be wrong? No. Would there be any possible way to document every single thing that's been said or done in just from the morning, from the start of Mass even until now? Because it's going to be like, oh, and then Dante sneezed, and Adam took papers to Mr. May, and then iPads, who had to charge their iPad today? You had to charge it. Dante charged his iPad, somebody else was charging. Jackson, did you charge your iPad? Somebody else charged their iPad. Somebody raised their hand, it's Giada's birthday. Like, there are a lot of different things that happen, right? When you go home and tell your family what you did during the day, you're not like, well, so then I read page 15, and then page 16. And then while I was reading page 15, the kid next to me dropped their pencil, but it wasn't a big deal because then the kid next to them picked it up. Like, no, right? You just say, if we were to summarize our day, we say, okay, we had Mass, that's very important. It's Giada's birthday, that's important. We ate donuts, that's important. Right? Are those the important parts?
Yes.
Can you imagine how amazingly challenging it would be to put all of our events from a few hours into one book? Now, this is all of human history. Like, from the time of creation to the early apostles. And it has to be readable and portable and understandable. So we have some parts, remember the Bible is written for different parts. So the book of Genesis is not, the beginning of it is not one of our historical, like, social studies books. Does that make sense? It's not a science book. It doesn't talk to us about how cells were created and how cells form other living things. No, that's not the purpose. Not of this section. So when you read and you're like, wait, how did people get that? Don't overthink it right now. God created people. Are you with me? Those are the takeaways. Because every year kids are like, well, wait, how? Yesterday we just read, 2 chapters ago, there were Adam and Eve and they just got kicked out of the garden. Now their kids are killing each other. And wait, we're about to read about Noah and God's going to destroy the whole earth? What? How is that even possible? And if you read this like a history book, this section like a history book, yeah, it gets a little dicey, right? Because it can't possibly explain everything. We wouldn't be able to store that much space. Bible flat, please. Yes?
The question that you said that one of us were going to ask, or everyone asked every year, like, if they ask, like, how is there other people, and he just Adam and Eve were the first people, so he probably made more people.
Yeah, like, I'm not going to overthink that. That's not my, we know Adam and Eve, we're good. We know that there are cities, we're good. We know everything was made and created by God, and everybody was made and created by God. We're not going to stress, right? Because we're better than that. Right now, you're going to open your book and read with me to Genesis. And we are looking at chapter 6. And we're starting on verse 5. And we're going all the way to verse 22. So we're not starting at the very beginning of chapter 6. We're starting, it's actually page 28 in your Bible. That it starts.
That was really close.
All right. When the Lord saw how wicked everyone on earth was and how evil their thoughts were all the time, he was sorry he'd ever made them and put them on the earth. Now, mind you, this is after Cain kills Abel. Like, these are people who God, spoke to directly. And they're brother killing brother. Like, things are not going so well. Because time and time again, people have made choices to move away from God. And do you remember what God told Cain when he didn't do the offering first? He said, do the offering right. He said, there's sin at your door. Because when you make one bad choice, isn't it easier to make another bad choice? And think about with lying. It's easy to say, you know, did you do your homework last night? And you tell your mom, yup. And you know you didn't. And then you get to school the next day and you tell the teacher, I left my homework at home. And you may have the best intention to like get it done, right? But then that night you end up with more homework. And then it grows and grows, and eventually this homework that shouldn't have been a problem, now you're just flat out lying, right? And your mom's like, well, why don't you have a grade? I don't know, the teacher didn't grade it. I turned it in, I'm sure I turned it in, right? So now mom's upset, the teacher's upset, and you're in a bad situation. Because you don't want to get in trouble, and you know that the longer this lie goes on, the bigger the trouble gets, right? Have you all been in those type of situations? I'm sure you have. You don't need to tell me what they were. But you're human, and we're all human, and we've all been in those situations where you're like, yikes, this is getting really far away from me really quickly. Have you had that problem? So for this, that's what God was saying, is that people started to mess up with like little things. You know, they ate a piece of fruit, no big deal. Next thing you know, it's a big deal. He was filled with regret that he said, I will wipe out these people I've created and also the animals and the birds because I'm sorry I made any of them. But the Lord was pleased with Noah. This is the story of Noah. He had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Noah had no faults and was the only good man of his time. He lived in fellowship with God, but everyone else was evil in God's sight, and violence was spread everywhere. God looked at the world and saw that it was evil for all the people living evil lives. God said to Noah, I've decided to put an end to all people. I will destroy them completely because the world is full of their violent deeds. Build a boat for yourself out of good timber. Make rooms in it, cover it with tar inside and out. Make it 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Make a roof for the boat and leave space of 18 inches between the roof and the sides. Build it with 3 docks and put a door on the side. I'm going to send a flood on earth to destroy everything, every living thing. Everything on earth will die. But I will make a covenant with you. Go on the boat, take your wife, your sons, and their wives. Take with you onto the boat a male and female of every kind of animal and every kind of bird, in order to keep them alive. Take along all kinds of food for you and for them. Noah did everything that God commanded. So God looks down at the earth and he's like, this is bad. This is really bad. We have people killing people. We have people living bad lives. We need to fix this. But he also looks at the earth. This is important. He also, Kellen, looks at the earth and says, that guy right there, Noah, and his family, they're good. They're making good choices. They're living the way I want them to. They deserve to continue to live. And that's important because God did not just send down a flood and wipe out everything. He looked and he took care of people. He took care of Noah. So for this one, this is going to be your slide 4. We're not doing it yet. Genesis chapter 6, verse 5 through 22 is Noah. Noah makes a new covenant with God. Yes?
What page is it? 'Cause I don't
We're on
see
page
6.
28. 6 started on page 27, and then we turned it.
Oh.
And 6 goes all the way up until the next big number 7. So, God makes a covenant with Noah. The sign of that covenant, who remembers the sign of Noah's covenant with God? What do we see in the sky? Kelly? The rainbow. The rainbow is the sign of God's covenant with Noah. Our next story, we're going to skip all the way to Genesis chapter 12 now. Still in Genesis. So, Noah has kids, his kids grow, they're Noah's grandchildren, the world continues. We're looking at, for our next slide, which is number 5, our next story comes from Genesis chapter 12, 1 through 3. And this is the story of Abraham. Abraham makes a covenant with God. So the covenant with the ark is that God's never going to destroy the earth by a flood again. God promised Noah, I will never destroy the earth by a flood again. Abraham, return to Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. So Abraham was a good man. The Lord said to Abraham, leave your country, your relatives, and your father's home, and go to a land that I am going to show you. I will give you many descendants, and they will become a great nation. I will bless you and make your name famous, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, but I will curse those who curse you. And through all of these, and through you I will bless all nations. So this is a big transition, okay? In the first part of the book of Genesis, and I'm reading, do you see the study it on your Bible page, page 34?
Yeah.
In the first part of the book of Genesis, chapters 1 through 11, God speaks to us through stories about symbolic people in time before recorded history. So Adam and Eve, all the people, like those are all those questions. There was no recorded human history. So these are things that were passed down over time. That makes sense. Though these chapters do not contain many historical facts, they're full of truth about God. And we talked about that. Like, this is not, the first 11 books are not a science book. They're not a history book. Right? But that doesn't make the things in them not real. It just means it can't possibly include everything that happened in early human history in these few pages. Starting with the story of Abram and Sarai, who are later renamed Abraham and Sarah, in chapter 12, Genesis becomes more like a history book. The names of the people and places are real. The events described in the second part of the book are not unusual. They are events that happen to real people. The characters struggle with things, some of the same things that we struggle with. Both parts of Genesis are important. They are the foundation of all we believe about God and God's relationship since the beginning of time. So this is important because Abraham used to be called Abram. Whenever God makes a covenant or a connection with people, their name, almost every time, their name changes. And we'll hear about that. You heard about St. Paul. He was originally called Saul. Names change, and it shows a different relationship with God. This is common throughout the entire Bible. But Abraham was known as the father of all nations. So now we're starting to get into the genealogy, right? God tells Abraham, leave everything you know. That's a challenge, isn't it? Leave everything you know and follow me. Leave your family, leave your land, and at this time land, that's like all you had to protect yourself. Leave everything you know and follow me. And Abraham did. This is a very big deal. So, you have 2 slides. You get these words on your slides. You should be adding to the Bunsey from yesterday. Don't create a new Bunsey. Just add slides after. Does that make sense? Zach, can you cut, please?